It took me exactly 22 seconds to realize my entire retirement had vanished. I stared at the empty bank account like it was a corpse, cold, lifeless, and shocking in its silence. $418,000 gone. But the real sting? The withdrawal was authorized by my own daughter. 30 years of missed birthdays, holidays spent in conference calls, and dinners eaten alone in hotel rooms. I had convinced myself I was building a future for us. For her. For Emily. I worked 80-hour weeks so she'd never have to. I said no to bedtime stories so I could say yes to stock portfolios. And this was the thanks I got? She gave it all to a man I'd never met. A so-called spiritual coach named Marcus. I almost called the police. Almost. But then my 10-year-old grandson, Lucas, looked up from the couch and said something that stopped me cold. I recorded everything, Grandpa. I think he made Mommy do it. My heart cracked, not just from betrayal, but from the sound of a child trying to protect the very person who had betrayed me. Maybe this wasn't just about the money. Maybe this was about all the years I hadn't protected her. And now, it was my turn to choose. Keep chasing ghosts of success. Or finally fight for what I'd ignored too long. I used to believe that numbers couldn't lie. Earnings, net worth, portfolio growth. They were simple, clean, and honest, unlike people. But when I stood in my office for the last time, surrounded by plaques that praised my precision and clients who toasted to my discipline, all I could think about was the dust-covered drawing taped behind my desk. A crayon sketch Emily made in 2nd grade. To the best daddy ever. I kept it like a relic, untouched, unseen, and forgotten, just like I had done to her most of her life. After her mother died when Emily was 7, I buried myself in work. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. I wanted to give her everything. A home with no bills, college with no debt, a life with no fear. I told myself I was doing it for her, that one day she'd understand. I opened a joint retirement account in both our names when she turned 18. I called it our forever safety net. It was supposed to be the proof that all my sacrifices meant something. But when she hugged me and said, "Thanks, Dad," I didn't notice how hollow her eyes looked. Or maybe I did, but ignored it. Back then, we used to talk every night. She'd ask about stocks like a game. I'd teach her the basics of compound interest and laugh when she said she wanted to be CEO of happiness. But when she hit 25, our calls became shorter. She was busy. I was busier. By then, I had moved into a corner office and flown over 20 cities that year alone. I remember visiting her college once for an alumni event. As I walked through the theater hall, I passed a photo wall. There was Emily, dressed as Juliet, mid-performance. I blinked, confused. I never saw that play. She never told me. Or maybe she did, and I declined. A vague memory surfaced. Her voice on the phone, nervously inviting me to something kind of important. And my answer, cold and automatic. I have a pitch meeting with a major investor that day. Looking back, that meeting earned us a new client and a 6-figure bonus. But I can't recall their name. What I do remember is the way Emily stopped asking me to show up after that. She changed gradually. It started with yoga retreats, then weekend workshops called Soul Reset or alignment gatherings. I teased her about it, called it expensive group naps. She laughed sometimes. Other times, she didn't. Then came the phrases: energetic blocks, ancestral trauma, quantum forgiveness. I nodded along, told myself it was a phase, a coping mechanism after her divorce. When she moved back in with Lucas, I thought it might be a chance to reconnect. But she was often gone. Retreats, one-on-ones with her coach, sometimes entire weekends away. She asked for money twice, modest amounts. Said it was for therapy. Not traditional, but it's really helping, she added. I didn't question it. I was just glad she was talking to me again. Lucas became my little shadow. Smart kid. Quiet, like his mother used to be. He'd sit by the fireplace reading books far beyond his grade level. One evening, as I handed him hot cocoa, he asked, "Grandpa, do people have to pay to be happy?" I chuckled. "Sometimes, buddy, but real happiness is free." He nodded slowly. That's what I thought. I should have asked more, pushed more, but I was tired, retired even. I thought I had finally earned rest. I thought the danger had passed. Then one night, I passed by the guest room and heard whispers. Emily on the phone, her voice cracking. But what if I lose him? What if I already have? He's just a child, Marcus. Then silence. A long, terrible silence. I paused, hand on the doorknob, but didn't enter. It felt like an intrusion. I told myself she was processing her pain, that she was finally healing in her own way. I wanted to believe she was okay. But the truth? She wasn't healing. She was slipping. And I was still standing on the sidelines, watching the same way I had when she was 8, crying over her first failed spelling test, while I was too busy proofreading a client's quarterly report. Some habits die hard. When Emily and Lucas moved back into the house, I thought it was a second chance, an unexpected gift. The halls, once echoing with silence and old jazz, suddenly had life again. Lucas filled the living room with books and Lego pieces. Emily brewed tea in the kitchen and hummed softly to herself. For the first time in years, I cooked breakfast for someone other than myself. It felt warm, but as quickly as that warmth arrived, it began to fade. Emily wasn't around much. She'd disappear early in the morning, return late, always dressed in flowy clothes and smelling of incense. She said she was attending workshops, healing sessions, she called them. I didn't pry. I figured she needed space, time. Maybe healing wasn't something I could understand. Lucas, though, he clung to me like ivy on old stone. We built a morning routine. Breakfast together, reading side by side, quiet games of chess before bed. He was sharp, observant, and older than his years. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at his mother's closed door, his lips pressed tight, like he wanted to say something but had already learned it wouldn't matter. One evening, we sat in the garden. He looked up and said, "Grandpa, do you know Marcus?" I paused. "No. Who's that?" He twirled a stick in the dirt. "He's Mommy's friend, the one who helps her heal. She says he helps people let go of old pain." I nodded, unsure how to respond. Lucas hesitated, then added, "He told Mommy you were selfish, that you only care about money." He glanced up at me quickly. "But I don't think that's true." I laughed, but it caught in my throat. "Thanks, buddy," I said, squeezing his shoulder. "That means a lot." But inside, something cracked. A few days later, Emily knocked on my study door. "Dad," she said softly, "I've been thinking. Since you're not working anymore, maybe I should help manage the account. Just keep an eye on things. You know, in case you forget something." Her tone was casual, almost innocent. I looked at her, my daughter, standing there with hopeful eyes. After everything, after all the guilt I carried, how could I say no? I handed her limited access. "Just don't move anything without asking," I joked. She smiled and kissed my cheek. "Of course, Daddy." The next morning, Lucas asked, "Grandpa, is money more important than people?" I stared at him, the spoon frozen halfway to my mouth. "No," I said. "Of course not." He nodded slowly. "That's what Mommy said. But she said Marcus thinks you used to believe it was." I changed the subject. Told myself kids say weird things sometimes. Weeks passed. Emily's absences became more frequent. Her eyes were glassy when she came home. She spoke in riddles. "Time is a circle," she'd whisper. "Energy returns what we suppress." I smiled, nodded. I didn't understand, but I didn't argue. I was just grateful she came home at all. Then came the email. It was routine. An alert from the bank. Transaction notification. $52,000 transferred to external account. My heart skipped. I stared at the screen. The account number looked familiar, but it didn't register. I told myself it must have been a pending payment I authorized long ago. Maybe for property taxes? A consulting fee? I couldn't remember. I should have asked. I should have checked. But I didn't. I was in the middle of helping an old client sell his company. One last deal before fully letting go. One more shot at feeling useful. I pushed the email into the back of my mind and went back to analyzing numbers. That night, Lucas asked if I wanted to play chess. I said I was tired. He didn't push. He just sat beside me and opened a book, his small hands flipping pages slowly. At one point he whispered, "I think Mommy's scared, Grandpa." I looked at him. "Why do you think that?" He shrugged. "She talks in her sleep. Says Marcus wants her to prove herself, that he sees her potential. But sometimes she cries after." I didn't know what to say. I just pulled him close and said, "You're safe here. I promise." He nodded but didn't smile. Later that week, Emily was gone for 3 days straight. No explanation, no message. Lucas and I waited each night by the window. The house, once so full, returned to its old silence. Only this time, it felt heavier. It was a Tuesday morning. I remember because I'd just sat down with my coffee. The house still quiet except for the ticking of the old wall clock. Lucas was upstairs getting ready for school. The email pinged softly. Another bank notification. I almost ignored it. Another transfer alert, probably a scheduled payment, but something in my gut told me to open it. Subject line, urgent, account alert, full balance withdrawal. My hands froze. I clicked. Amount, $418,732. Destination, Ascension Gateway LLC, initiated by Emily Cooper. For a full 15 seconds, I couldn't breathe. My vision tunneled, my fingers trembled. I refreshed the page 3 times. Gone. Every cent. The entire joint account. The safety net. The legacy. The sacrifices. Gone. I tried calling Emily. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Nothing. I ran upstairs, burst into Lucas's room. "Where's your mom?" I asked. Too loud, too sharp. He blinked, toothbrush still in his mouth. "She left last night," he said. "Said she was going with Marcus to, reconnect with her past lives. Something about energy cords." I sat on his bed, lightheaded. "Did she say where?" "No," he said, drying his mouth. "But she took her purple suitcase, the one she said she'd only use for real transformations." I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit something. But I couldn't. Not with Lucas watching. Instead, I opened my laptop and started digging. Ascension Gateway LLC had no website, no reviews, no digital footprint, except one address registered in Nevada. A UPS mailbox. My daughter had wired her entire inheritance to a shell company run by a fraud in linen robes. I called the bank. Too late. The transfer was authorized, the access legitimate. The rep on the line said, I'm sorry, sir. You'll need to speak with your co-account holder. My own daughter. I closed the call, slammed the laptop shut, and leaned back, eyes closed. 30 years of sacrifice. 30 years of chasing security. And I had handed the keys to someone who believed her father's soul was toxic. Lucas sat beside me. Are we in trouble? No, I said, though it tasted like a lie. But Mommy might be. That night, Emily didn't return, nor the next. On the third day, just after sunset, her car pulled into the driveway. I met her at the door. Inside. Now. She walked in slowly, head high, eyes unreadable. She didn't apologize. She didn't look ashamed. I know what you're going to say, she began. Then let's skip it. Where's the money? She shrugged. Gone. I transferred it to Marcus. It's not about money anymore, Dad. It's about healing. Healing. My voice cracked. You gave away our life savings to a man who doesn't exist on paper. He exists in energy, she said calmly. You wouldn't understand. You've always been stuck in numbers, logic, fear. My fists clenched. Emily, that money was for your future, for Lucas. No, she said, voice rising. How that money was your way of controlling us, of pretending you cared when all you really worshipped was your damn career. Something broke in me. I worked for you, for everything you have. She laughed bitterly. No, you worked for yourself. You needed to be important, needed people to applaud you. You weren't there when Mom died. You weren't there when I had nightmares, when I got my first period, my first heartbreak. You missed it all. I stood stunned. And then Lucas, from behind us, whispered, I think you both missed a lot. We turned. He stood holding his small recorder. Emily stared. Lucas, what are you doing? I heard you, he said, eyes wide but steady. And I heard Marcus too. I recorded everything. He said Grandpa was poison, that you needed to cut him out, that the money would help him free you. Emily went pale. You said it was just for healing, Lucas added, voice trembling. But he said you needed to prove your loyalty, that if you didn't give him everything, he'd leave. And maybe take me too. The room fell silent. I reached for the recorder. Hit play. Marcus's voice crackled through, smooth, manipulative. He'll never change. He'll never see you. You have to let him go. The money is energy. Let it flow. It's the only way. The child, he'll adapt. You don't need his permission. You don't need anyone. Emily crumpled to the floor, hands over her mouth. I felt sick. Betrayed didn't begin to cover it. It wasn't just about the money. It was the years, the blindness, the echo of every missed bedtime and ignored phone call. This was the price. This was what it had bought me. But what crushed me more was Lucas, standing there, eyes full of fear, and yet still loving her. He walked over, knelt beside her. I still love you, Mom, he whispered, but I don't trust him. He scared me. Emily broke. She sobbed into her hands, shaking. I sat across from them, silent. The walls between us, invisible for so long, now fully exposed. It would take everything to tear them down. The next morning, I called my realtor and listed the vacation house in Vermont. I hadn't visited in years, but it held memories. Summers with Emily before she turned 12, a snowstorm where we got stranded and roasted marshmallows over a gas fireplace. But memories didn't pay for lawyers, and this time, I wasn't going to let Marcus disappear with our lives. I also terminated my remaining advisory contracts. Clients were surprised. Some tried to convince me to stay on. But I was done chasing other people's futures. Mine was burning in front of me. I filed a civil lawsuit against Marcus, formally against Ascension Gateway LLC, and hired a team to trace the money. It wasn't much to go on, but the recording Lucas had captured gave us a thread. A local investigator discovered that Marcus had multiple aliases, each tied to short-lived companies designed to bleed vulnerable people dry. During all this, Emily was hollow. She rarely spoke. She moved slowly, like her limbs were heavier than they should be. One night, Lucas came into my room with a flyer. "Grandpa," he whispered, "this place helps moms like mine." It was a trauma recovery center, not another spiritual retreat. The next day, I showed it to Emily. "Please," I said, "just try." To my surprise, she agreed. At the center, Emily was paired with a real therapist, not someone selling vibrations or past life insights, just a woman with kind eyes and a quiet voice. During a session that Lucas and I were invited to, Emily broke down. She clutched Lucas's hand and whispered, "I almost left. For good." I felt my stomach drop. She continued, "He told me Lucas would be safer without me, that my mother wound would destroy him, and I believed him." I packed a bag one night. I stood over Lucas while he slept, and I almost walked out. Lucas tightened his grip. "But you didn't." She nodded, tears streaming. "Because you said you loved me, even when I messed up." No one spoke for a while after that. From then on, she began to climb. Slowly, painfully, but upward. At home, I took over full-time care of Lucas. I packed his lunches, walked him to school, helped with homework. We planted a tomato garden in the backyard, just the two of us. He called it our healing project. Some nights, he still had nightmares. I'd sit beside his bed and hold his hand until he fell asleep. One afternoon, as we painted the fence, Lucas turned and said, "Grandpa, you know why I recorded Mommy and Marcus?" I looked at him, brush mid-air. He shrugged. "I was scared. One time Marcus told Mommy, if I didn't stop asking questions, he might take her to a place where I couldn't reach her." He said it soft, like a joke, but I didn't think it was funny. He wiped his hands on his shorts. So I put my old recorder in her purse, just in case. My chest tightened. This child, barely 10, had done what none of us had. He'd listened, watched, acted, while I had doubted, minimized, rationalized. Later that week, Emily sat across from me at the kitchen table. Her eyes were clearer than I'd seen in months. "Dad," she said, "can we talk?" I nodded. "I used to hate you," she said bluntly, "for missing everything, for choosing clients over me. I told myself you didn't care, that you didn't love me." I held her gaze. I deserved that. "No," she said. "You didn't. Not entirely. You just didn't know how to love the way I needed, and I didn't know how to ask." She exhaled. "I want to try again. Not just as your daughter, but as a person you can know, and who can know you." It was the first time in nearly 3 decades that we'd spoken without pretense, without performance. There was still distance, still mistrust. But for the first time, the bridge between us wasn't imaginary. It was real. Healing didn't happen with a grand gesture. It didn't arrive in a single therapy session or come wrapped in apologies. It came quietly, like the changing of seasons. So slow you barely noticed until you stepped outside and felt the warmth where once there was cold. It started with a drawing pad. Lucas had one. He loved sketching little houses, trees, even silly cartoons of me with exaggerated glasses and a cape. One afternoon, he slid a blank page toward me. "Try it," he said. I laughed. I haven't drawn since grade school. That's okay, he said. Neither have I. We sat together, coloring in silence. The lines were shaky, the proportions all wrong, but the moment was perfect. A week later, I signed us up for a weekend art workshop, just the two of us. I didn't care that I was the oldest in the room by 25 years. I didn't care that my painting of a tree looked more like an octopus. Lucas beamed when I hung it on the fridge. Emily joined us for a cooking class soon after. She insisted we start with something simple. Pasta from scratch. Flour flew, eggs cracked. At one point I dropped a measuring cup, and it bounced off the counter with a loud clatter. For a split second, I expected her to flinch. Instead, she burst out laughing. I hadn't heard her laugh like that since she was a teenager. We started a routine. Tuesday nights were family dinner nights. No phones, no distractions, just us. Lucas told long-winded stories from school. Emily experimented with spices. I did the dishes. One afternoon, while reorganizing the garage, Emily found a dusty old storage box. She opened it, rummaging through yellowed papers and forgotten keepsakes. Then she stopped. "Dad," she called. "What's this?" I turned and saw her holding a crumpled, faded sheet of paper. A child's drawing, crayon and glitter. It showed a stick-figure man with a red cape flying over a house labeled "Our Home." At the bottom, in loopy handwriting, "To the best super dad, from your Supergirl, age 8. Her eyes welled up. "I didn't think you kept any of this," she whispered. "I kept all of it," I said. She didn't speak for a long time, just sat down beside the box, holding that drawing like it was a relic. Maybe it was. After that day, something shifted. Emily started working again. Not in finance, not in sales. She took a part-time job at a local women's shelter. Later, she began volunteering with an organization that supported single mothers who had been victims of spiritual abuse and psychological manipulation. It wasn't easy. Some days she came home drained, silent, but she was present, grounded. And when she smiled, it reached her eyes. Meanwhile, the case against Marcus moved forward. For months, his lawyers denied everything. They painted Emily as unstable, claimed the money was gifted willingly, that Marcus had no knowledge of any manipulation. But then came Lucas's recording. It had taken some legal maneuvering to get it admitted, but once it was played in court, Marcus's voice, coercive, smug, discussing cutting ties and proving devotion through transfer of assets, the room changed. Jurors stiffened. Reporters scribbled faster. Marcus went pale. The guilty verdict came 2 weeks later. Marcus was sentenced for fraud, emotional exploitation, and financial abuse. Emily wasn't just a witness. She became a symbol, a survivor. She didn't celebrate. She didn't gloat. She just hugged Lucas and said, "You saved me." I watched them from the kitchen, and for the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel proud. Not for what I had earned, but for who I had become. I stopped thinking about legacy and numbers. The account was gone. The house in Vermont sold. My name was no longer on any plaques or office doors. But each time Lucas called me Grandpa, each time Emily sent me a photo from her volunteer work, I felt something richer than any stock return. One night, as I tucked Lucas in, he asked, "Do you think I'll be a good man when I grow up?" I sat on the edge of his bed, searching for words. "You already are," I said. "But if you want to know what really makes a man, it's not the money he earns or the titles he holds. It's how he shows up, how he protects the people he loves, how he listens and learns." Lucas nodded thoughtfully. "Like you and Mom?" I swallowed. "We're still learning. But yeah, like us." Outside, the wind rustled through the trees. Inside, the house felt full again. We weren't healed, not completely, but we were healing. Together. The auditorium wasn't large. Maybe 70 folding chairs, a modest projector screen, a single microphone. But as I stepped up to the podium, heart pounding, it felt like standing on a cliff's edge. The banner behind me read, "Reclaiming Fatherhood, Presence over Perfection." A panel of speakers sat to my left, therapists, educators, and survivors. I was the oldest, the only one with a silver beard and a grandson waiting backstage. I hadn't planned to speak. I was supposed to introduce the next guest. But when the organizer handed me the mic and whispered, "Say something, just a few words," I froze, then nodded. I looked out at the audience, mostly men, middle-aged, a few in suits, some with tear-streaked cheeks, all of them waiting for something true. "I used to think being a father meant providing," I began. "A roof, food, a future. I believed success could shield my family from pain." I glanced down at the cue cards I didn't need. But I missed birthdays, plays, breakdowns. I gave my daughter everything except what she needed most. Me. I paused, swallowing. I lost her once, not to death, to something worse. Distance I built with my own two hands. A few heads nodded. One man wiped his eyes. "But I got a second chance," I said, "because of someone braver than me." I turned toward the curtain and waved. Lucas walked out, small and serious in his button-up shirt. The room leaned in. I handed him the mic. He hesitated, then spoke clearly. "My mom got lost, Grandpa got quiet, and I got scared. So I listened. I recorded. And I told the truth." Then he looked at me. "Grandpa didn't save me. I saved him." Silence fell like snowfall, then applause, gentle, then stronger. Lucas bowed and walked back, gripping my hand. My throat tightened. After the session, fathers lined up. One told me, "You gave me permission to try again." Another whispered, "I haven't spoken to my daughter in 5 years. I'm calling her tonight." It was then I realized our story wasn't just ours. Back home, Emily was building something of her own. She had launched a free course called Truth Over Illusion for women escaping spiritual manipulation. What started as a support group in a community center became a virtual platform with hundreds of members across the country. I watched her record one of the sessions. She spoke with calm conviction. "Healing isn't about escaping reality," she said. "It's about walking through it, with your eyes open and your people close." Sometimes she invited Lucas to join. He'd sit beside her, drawing while she talked. She told me his presence reminded her why she fought so hard to come back. As for me, I found a new rhythm. Once a month, I mentored other retired men. Some divorced, some estranged, most lost. We met at a coffee shop with no agenda, just truth. I called it Legacy Table. We didn't talk about investments. We talked about missed chances, about learning to say "I love you" without choking, about showing up even when it's awkward. One man brought his teenage son after 3 sessions. Another hugged me and said, "I haven't been this honest in 30 years." Sometimes I'd bring old letters from Emily. I read them aloud. Her birthday wishes, her confessions, her silences. We'd talk about what we heard between the lines. One evening, as I was cleaning out the attic, I found my old will. Neat, precise, full of numbers. I sat down at my desk and wrote a new one. I didn't list properties. There weren't many left. I didn't break down portfolios. Most of the money was gone. Instead, I filled it with stories. Letters to Lucas, describing what kind of boy he was at 10. A letter to Emily, recalling the day she first tied her shoes without help and grinned at me like she'd conquered the world. Notes to myself from years ago. Things I wish I had said, and things I finally did. At the top, I wrote, "To my family, the real treasure I almost lost. No lawyer needed, just truth and love."